Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Gridiron Heroics Football Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean, and today I am joined by my two Monday co-hosts. We have Nick Merriam, our draft analyst, director of draft content, and we have Kyron Samuels, our offensive line specialist and insider. Guys, it was a weekend of divisional round football, man. It was a good week. I mean, I think there were some larger point disparities than we necessarily expected, but it was pretty good. Nick, how you doing today, man?
Doing pretty well. I'm a little tired, but we're almost done here. Stuff goes so by so quickly, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've got two weekends of real football left, and that's it. And then we have to wait a long time. I always take it for granted once the season's about halfway through, and it's a long wait, man. Especially after the draft, like getting training camp. Brutal. Kyron, how you doing today?
Doing good, man. Pretty exciting weekend of football. I know we got some blowouts, a couple blowouts, but I thought it was still a really good week of football, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as the true point spread, there was only one that was particularly big, but there were a couple of games that just didn't feel as close as we probably thought that they were going to be. But all right, so let's get into it, man. I mean, first and foremost, I want to introduce Noah Ashley, our producer of the show. Noah does a lot for us, and honestly, he basically did everything to prep for this show today. So appreciate you. Noah, how you doing, man?
Doing well. Fighting off a little bit of a flu in the cold months here, but I'm feeling all right.
Yeah, that stinks, man. I got my major sickness out of the way in like October. Yeah, it was right before Halloween. So usually if I do get sick, it's like that one and it hits me hard. So I'm hopeful that I've got a good 9 months left in me before I hit another one. But all right, man. All of our teams are officially out of it. I mean, they were last week too. So this is really pure spectators, not much investment. Nick, you avoided an NFC East NFC Conference Championship. So I'm happy for you at least there. But I still have a sneaking suspicion that we might be looking at at least an NFC East contender in the Super Bowl. How are you feeling about that before we jump into the games?
I mean, I said it last week. I don't know if I said it on the show, but I definitely tweeted it that I was very up in the air about my Niners-Eagles NFC title pick. And I said Niners initially, and I think I would probably change that today if I had to rethink it for sure.
Well, I mean, what we have set up now going forward is a battle of what I believe we probably agree on are the two best quarterbacks in the NFL in one conference and the two most well-rounded teams in the NFL in the other conference. So, I think when you look at some of the trenches, the Eagles probably do win out. And then, I mean, I don't think it'd be a shocker to say that we're going to give Jalen Hurts the edge over Brock Purdy. So the Eagles definitely have they'll go into that game favored more than likely, I would imagine. Don't you think, Kyron?
Probably so. I mean, I don't think there's anything that really changed the way people viewed the 49ers yesterday. Maybe even a little disparaging a little bit if you look at some of the quarterback play. I think he played more than well enough to win the football game. But when you talk about betting lines and setting stuff like that, some of those plays where he probably put the ball to harm's way will probably stick in people's minds when they're setting lines and stuff like that.
All right. So I guess we better get into it. First game that we have is might just be Mahomes' flu game. I know it wasn't a true championship, so it's a little bit different, but I just think in terms of what he was able to do in a game where his injury was substantial, it wasn't like he was playing without an ACL or something like that, like we've heard of before, but playing through a high ankle sprain, it's extremely, extremely painful. And it just makes it really, really challenging to have any semblance of mechanics. But I guess it's not surprising that the one player who, has basically not needed mechanics is like a vital part of his passing career so far was able to overcome that. So an unbelievable performance there. I don't even want to give the Jaguars too hard of a time because they were pretty competitive in this. Just like any other good football game, it was just one play here or there that really changed it. I think the fumble would probably be that play. But all in all, the better team walks away. The Jags have a lot to be excited about, and Reagan has a lot to be excited about. But it was always the Chiefs, as Reagan likes to say. So, Nick, what were your main takeaways from this game?
Besides the fact that Mahomes is just like a crazy person and can make it work regardless of being on one foot, I'm a little worried about that going forward. I think clearly, he played well, but it affected him. There was definitely some misses on his tape and some, putting on the play a little bit early that you wouldn't normally see from Mahomes because of the injury, and that'll certainly affect them going forwards. I think it's important to note that this type of injury, it's just like it's a pain thing. If you re-injure it, it's going to hurt more. Anything that would really destroy the ankles, ligaments, or bone would be a type of thing that would probably already do that. Like you're not at a severe risk of like destroying any of the structural part of the ankle because of this injury. It's a pain and swelling management type thing, right? And it can be really difficult depending on where that swelling is. Based on the way he was moving around, I would assume it's not great. And, obviously adrenaline and probably whatever the heck they gave him at halftime helped him play through that second half. And I'm wondering what it's going to look like against Cincy upcoming week. I hope Mahomes is good enough to go and play well because, I think the league is more fun when he is ready to play. But I don't know. But it's interesting. Jacksonville certainly showed up for this game. I don't think they played terribly. I don't think they have any. They shouldn't hang their heads. I think Lawrence maybe made a kind of dumb interception at the end of the game, but it's like, the type of year that he had was respectable. The offensive line didn't do a horrible job run blocking. Maybe pass pro, they were a little overmatched by Chris Jones. And I think, the weapons let them down in some cases, but they played well enough. I think at all levels, they overachieved, in the ways you'd want to for a developing young team, and they should be proud of it. Really what this came down to is the Chiefs ultimately were able to produce offensively when they need to, even with the injured Mahomes, because he is that guy. And then when they had the one drive when Chad Henne came in, Andy Reid kind of went in his bag and pulled out the right play calls to get them down the field there too. And I think it's really hard to beat the Chiefs when you get a drive against Chad Henne and they go down the field and score a touchdown. Like, you're just not going to win that game. Pretty much any team would lose that game, in my opinion, but maybe except for the team the Philadelphia Eagles. So we're going to talk about the next game, who just might be the one team talent-wise that can match up with it. But it's just it was impressive. The Jacksonville stayed in it. Lawrence made the throws to keep him in this game, but ultimately even injured Mahomes is just an unreal football player.
No doubt. And I think, we also have to give a lot of credit to the rest of the offense because, whether he was in or Henne was in, they took over that game. You know what I mean? It wasn't just Andy Reid putting him in the right position. It was the offensive line absolutely dominating as they ran the ball. And, as they tried to take pressure off him throughout the rest of the game, they played a huge part in this. Kyron, I mean, you must have been having a good time watching that all go to work.
Yeah, man. I tweeted out during the game. I didn't know if I thought that they would be able to produce points as much as they did, but I was like, I have a meme that's of Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid, and I call them the sickos because they just do so much. Like, they give you so many looks. They build off of everything. I think better than anybody in the National Football League. And then once you add a guy to the fold like a Kadarius Toney, we've seen how they've been able to use him all over the field and the things that they were able to do with him. And I think the biggest thing for this Chiefs team now is that they have a running back one. They have a guy that can go in there and get you 100 yards every game now, and they've committed to it. He had Isaiah Pacheco had 12 carries for 95 yards, 7.9 per carry. I thought he should have got the ball a little bit more, especially late in the game, but they were moving the ball. You got to give a big shout out to Travis Kelce as well. Best player on the field at all times, in my opinion. Like, 14 catches, 17 targets, 98 yards, 2 touchdowns. And he's just a rock for that team. Like, when everything's going crazy, when they needed to get a first down, they were finding him. Even when they were, 3rd and 17 and they needed to get back in field goal range, they got him 14 yards, get them back in field goal range. Little things like that. Every time they needed a big play, they found a way to get the ball to Travis Kelce. And one more shout out to Kadarius Toney because he just made impact plays. He only touched the ball 6 times, but he had 14 yards per carry and he had 7.2 yards per catch. Like those are impact plays, splash plays that even if you're not scoring touchdowns and you're not having just like this crazy fantasy point game, you are giving other teams stuff to prepare for in the long run going forward, and you're just finding ways to create mismatches. And I think that they did a great job of that. So shout out to the Chiefs offense, but the Chiefs defense played exceptional as well. I think the healthy Mahomes in this game, it probably is a little bit wider of a margin. I'm kind of sick because I took the Chiefs spread, and then that backdoor cover kind of sucked. But other than that, I thought the Chiefs played really well, and I think they'll be fine going forward, even with a bit of a hobbled Mahomes. The fact that they can run the ball now, I think gives them a chance against anybody still.
Yeah, I took the Jags to cover. I thought this game would be kind of close. I don't know if it necessarily, I don't think you can say Mahomes getting hurt necessarily changed it because they were so effective offensively, and the one drive they didn't have and they still scored. But like the Jags fought. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is still getting used to the league, right? I mean, we called his rookie season a wash, and this is like his real rookie season. I think we can largely agree on that. But yeah. So I want to shout out Chris Jones. Obviously, I didn't put him in my All Pro when we did like the 3/4 season All Pro, and it's like that was a mistake. I mean, he already had a good season, but he just dominated down the stretch. And not that this game in fact impacts your All Pro selection, but he was excellent in it. And I got to second you on Travis Kelce. Unbelievable. I mean, just always open, always finds a way to be open, makes a tough catch. Just like turns upfield, gets a tough yards. Just if he's in the red zone, he's just going to turn upfield and score. It's just, it's just a given. So an incredible athlete. I don't know if he's the best player on the field at all times when Mahomes is out there, because I think he's probably the best player in the league at this point. That's just my opinion. But Kelce is amazing at his age. It's wild, because I remember a lot of people gave the Chiefs a hard time about signing him to that extension because he was getting older. But you look at that deal, and one, obviously it's paying dividends because he's just producing. But two, it was a really, really, really team-friendly deal coming off that Mahomes deal. And so, like, when you've got these two guys under team-friendly contracts like that, they're not going anywhere. This team is going to be very good for a long time. I mean, say a long time, but at least like 2-3 more years. That pairing is going to be very effective. So, Nick, did you have anything else that you wanted to say on this game, whether it be on the Jags or the defense for the Chiefs?
Yeah, just the weapons that Kansas City have are really starting to, I think, be broadened in their usage, and especially Kadarius Toney. That we kind of think of him as this guy in space who could really make players miss. But you have to remember, he's also a 200-pound dude, and he's got a pretty good frame, and he's running physically on the edge here, and it's really getting those tough yards that I think has benefited this Chiefs offense a lot. Is that you see him, he almost like can run from like a 90-degree angle of his upper body to the ground and just keep going, get those extra few yards. It's been impressive. But also with Kelce, just how many times have we seen Kansas City run the play action rollout or just a regular rollout, which I think this was not even play action this week. And then as Mahomes is passing Kelce on like a chip and curl, he throws it back across his body, and then Kelce always seems to just be very comfortable cutting back towards the defense and scoring, as if like they know, like it's almost like design, like they know that there's not just gonna be a linebacker there to crack down on him, because he always finds that space and gets to the end zone. It seems like they score a touchdown like every other week on that, but they really do a good job. Both Mahomes, Kelce, and Andy Reid and Bieniemy getting that guy touches and giving him space to run with the ball. And he has some like extra sensory ability to turn the right direction and get those extra yards.
Yeah. Well, also, I think his change of direction is ridiculous for his size. It's like I think you don't necessarily realize it because it doesn't look as fast as when you see players like Kadarius Toney or Isaiah Pacheco out there and like in the same offense. But for his size, it's not just that they know the linebacker's not going to be there. It's just that he turns back and and begins upfield trajectory so quickly for a 250-pound dude. So just crazy, man. Kyron, what were your thoughts on the Jags O-line? Because they had to shift some things around. They didn't have their left tackle playing. I mean, I think he played okay considering, but there were definitely a few moments where, I think they would have preferred to have their starter in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think they played too bad at all. I've seen a lot of people giving them hell for it, but I mean, I think they played about as well as you could have expected them to play. I think they struggled a little bit more in the interior than they have in recent weeks, but that's because they're playing one of the best interior guys in the NFL. I mean, that's just what happens when you play guys of that caliber. They can kill games essentially. We've seen it with Aaron Donald. Like the Bengals offensive line last year. I mean, they struggled, but they played pretty well in the playoffs, and you just saw how that guy took over that game. It was kind of like that for Chris Jones as well. Like when you have a guy that's that good of that caliber, it really doesn't matter who you have in there; they're going to struggle, and that's why I think that we're going to see it a little bit next week, projecting the AFC Championship game. We're going to see Chris Jones, wreak havoc on that game as well because he's just that caliber of player.
Yeah, I for sure. So, I mean, I know from previous conversation that Trevor Lawrence is a major arrow up for Nick and I. How do you feel about Trevor Lawrence and where he kind of falls into the ranking system for quarterbacks at this point, Kyron?
I would just say people should be a little hesitant and be a little cautious. It's not because I don't believe in Trevor Lawrence and not because I don't think he's going to be a really good, maybe, top 3 or 4 quarterback one day, but give these kids time to grow, give these kids time to adjust to the learning curves. He's still young. He's still going to make a lot of stupid decisions. We're still seeing Josh Allen learn. We're still seeing him go through the motions, go through the process of becoming an elite quarterback and being consistent. So it's never a guarantee that you're going to get back to these type of situations, to a divisional round in the playoff. People should be realistic with the expectations going forward. People should be happy and excited about what they're seeing from him, but give him room to grow and go through his growing pains still as well, because he still made some, questionable decisions in that game, missed a couple big throws on third downs. If he played a little bit better, I think that team, could have had a chance to sneak that one out at the end. But not putting it on Trevor Lawrence at all, but give him room to grow and give him the time to actually step into the fold of being an elite quarterback before we put him up there with the guys that have proved it over a longer period of time.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't call him elite right now. I'd say he's firmly in the top 10. But I think what's exciting about a guy like Lawrence is just that what you talk about is that he is still growing. Like clearly, you watch that guy play, and he's not a finished product yet. And despite that, he's a good quarterback right now. And that's what's exciting about a player like Lawrence. Whereas I watched Dak Prescott and I've seen him play now, the last 3 years. And I don't know that there's much of an upward trajectory anymore to his game. So that's kind of the difference between two guys like that, in my opinion, at least. And that's where the excitement, I think, comes from. But yes, as of now, you have to, temper expectations a bit just because they are a team that still needs some pieces. They're finding their way and, they want a weaker division, let's be honest. And who knows? They might be back here next year. They might not be, but it's dependent on his development and who they add. And, he could make a big jump next year. It could be 2 years, we don't know.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, it could be a little bit. I think we need to see the Jaguars front office hit home runs the way that, some of these other top offenses with top quarterbacks have. I mean, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, I mean, they, as good as we believe Joe Burrow is, those guys make a big difference. And yeah, ETN is a nice player, but he's not one of those guys, and the Chiefs, I mean, they've had Kelsey, and up until this year, they've had Tyreek Hill. So they just don't have those kinds of playmakers right now. The offense isn't just as flush with talent as some of those other top quarterbacks. So as much as we want to put Trevor Lawrence in those conversations, some of his developments is all going to be reliant just on those front office people making sure that he has what he needs to compete in games like this on a consistent basis. Because he's always going to be able to do it from game to game. But if you want to guarantee you can really compete in these big games, you've got to be able to do that. So, I mean, quick question for the Jags right now. You're looking at the first round of the draft. Depends on who's available, of course. But where do you think they need to invest most heavily? I mean, they have Calvin Ridley coming. Who knows exactly what he looks like after all his time off. But do you think they need to look more at the offensive line? Do you think they need to look more at receiver? I mean, after making pretty notable investments in the defense this past year, I mean, I'm not sure you'd go in that direction, but maybe you want to. Nick, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, positionally, they have a lot of needs, to be honest with you. I think the only place that they kind of will maybe sit and just kind of let develop out is their D line. I would even think they need to add more corner and safety and, even linebacker. But offensively, O line, they definitely need tight end. We'll see if Evan Ingram's back. They probably want another receiver. So at this point, because you have so many needs, like you're going to be trying to fill those in free agency. I'm a big guy that thinks you go in a draft, you identify where the value is positionally at that point. They're picking 25th, I believe. And that's like a pretty good range. Like if there's like one of those top tackles available there, like you feel really good about taking one there, but they might not be. That's kind of like corner hotspot, kind of where the receivers might start. So that's where I expect kind of they'll be looking, just because that's what's available. Maybe if the tight ends, if there's a guy you feel comfortable at that point, you think about. I'm not certain at this point that I'm like really like into that idea, but it's possible. I have to really dive into those guys a little more. But I think in terms of offense, there's probably a valuable player there that's worth that 25th pick that you feel really good about. And if not, I mean, this is a draft where I think when all else fails, especially in the first round, corner is a position that you should be looking at.
Well, let's just ask in quick summary, if there was a position which you would think they would be the most happy about being the best player available when they pick, what do you think that would be? What do you think their single biggest need for a first round pedigree type player to be?
It's probably still wide out. I mean, I think their O-line's decent, and I think with the way Lawrence plays, I think his play style is comparatively similar to Herbert. And although Herbert had better pass protection once Solier stepped in, I don't think the Chargers have ever been like one of the best pass protection teams. And I think they've been good enough. Like Lawrence can, although his numbers dip when he's pressured, I don't know. See, the thing for me is that the top tackles in this draft class, personally, like I'm a little lower on than most people. So for them, it's probably tackle, but I might go receiver.
Well, all right, Kyron, what are your thoughts? Just if you think there's one position that they would be most pleased about being the best player available when they pick, what position do you think that would be?
Probably guard or tackle. I think I really do think they've done a fine job with putting more weapons around him from where he was his rookie year till now. I mean, you pay money for Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram. You have Calvin Ridley coming in. ETN went over 1,000 yards this year, had a hell of a year, looked really good in both playoff games. I think they have enough weapons. You have to shore up the line a little bit more, and he can really take a step. I think that if a guy like Osiris Torrance is there at 25, I doubt he makes it that far, to be honest. But if a guy like Osiris is there, you take a guy like that. If a Broderick Jones is there, you take a guy like that. I think that can really help him take a step forward because, like you said, he does struggle against pressures. And he's mobile, he's athletic, but he's not a guy that is really going to extend a lot of plays with his legs and really be a guy like that you can count on to kind of counteract some of those deficiencies in the offensive line. So, like Nick said, I think they're, if we talk about the 10 best offensive lines, I think they could be 10. You can make an argument that they're 10 or 10 to 12 range. I don't think that they're terrible, but if you're talking about really competing and going to Super Bowls, going deep in the playoffs with your franchise quarterback, I would shore up the offensive line a little bit more.
Okay, all right, fair enough, and I like that. I think if you need to try and score on a drive, when your starting quarterback sits out next playoff run, then probably the offensive line is a place that you want to invest to try and do that. All right, so our first NFC East matchup, actually our only NFC East matchup of this week, we have the Giants and the Eagles, and it was a boat race. It wasn't even close. It was an incredible performance by the Eagles from basically every position on the field, offense or defense. I don't think you can look at a single place and be like, they really could have done a bit more here, And against a more well-rounded team than the Giants, maybe it wouldn't look quite like that, but it was just execution at pretty much its finest across the board. I mean, Goddard's back, making early impact. Both receivers playing really well. Miles Sanders gashing the defense. Jalen Hurts playing well. Offensive line, absolutely dominant. Lane Johnson playing really well through injury. Defensively, the corners are just locking down the receivers in a way that The Vikings certainly did not last week, which is something that I had concerns for the Giants about. And, and their defensive line getting home too, and playing the run much better after their additions late in the season of those veteran, run stuff and type dudes. So, I mean, what's your takeaway from this game? That they have no weak spot? I mean, I'm not sure how to phrase that question, Nick, but I guess just whatever you want to talk about this game, because
yeah, I mean,
Eagles
it's just
all the way.
Player for player, the Eagles are a better team than the Giants. I can't point to a specific unit outside of like running back, which, great. If you're going to get destroyed in the trenches, it doesn't really matter, that the Giants are better than Philly at. And that's the problem with this specific matchup. Kyron, I believe, said it. I was kind of thinking at the time when I saw him say it, like, the Eagles, Hurts had thrown for 99 pass yards and they had 21 points. Like, they really did not need to throw the ball in this game to win. They just kind of took the lead early and cruised to the end. And it's really impressive, especially late in the season to this point, when you can do that to a team who has won a playoff game because of, quite frankly, some of their studs in the trenches. I mean, Lawrence and Thibodeau on the defensive side were a big part of why the Giants are here. And you really limited their ability to pass rush the entire first half, because you said, all right, we're going to run a lot of quick game. We're going to stretch you out. We're going to, run tons of zone running plays. We're going to get the RPOs going. We're going to get the ball out quick. I believe the touchdown to Smith was an RPO that Hurts didn't even, fake the handoff for, because they caught the Giants corners sneaking in on the run game because they were getting gashed so bad. They just threw out to Smith, and he, had a 2-on-1 on the outside, and he's in for the touchdown. Like, it's a clinic in terms of the Eagles coaching, both on offense and defense. And that's not saying the Giants are poorly coached in this game. It's just that's what the job the Eagles are doing right now, both schematically and, to be honest with you, in terms of, I don't know, Kyron likes to hear this, but the analytics decisions, the Eagles are number one in the league right now. Like, they're just taking advantage of all of these edges. They're up 27-0 at halftime. They have bonus timeouts, and they're like, all right, well, we're going to go up and we're going to do a hard count on the 2.5-yard line on our 2-point conversion, just because we have these timeouts, we can use them. And if you jump, we can go and get an extra point. You're on the 2-point conversion try, you jump. So it's just like all these little edges they're looking for, and they're just so very detail oriented, meticulous. This is the type of team that finds any little thing they can to get past you. And it's going to be tough for somebody to really, beat this team. You have to be very thorough. And just thinking about like how you stop this offense. And the one time that I think that we've seen a team like really control this offense all year is Washington. And it's silly to say, because they still kind of got gashed. They gave up 24 points in the first matchup in one quarter. They gave up 21 in the second game and gave up some big plays. But realistically, in that first game, like, they shut him out in the first half. They got some stops in the red zone. They forced a turnover. It just, Wentz was so horrifically bad that they were like on their heels and giving the Eagles short fields. And there was a big play for Philly that should have been reviewed that didn't get reviewed and probably would have been brought back if it was. But what the difference is between Washington and a team like the Giants defensively is, yeah, the Giants have those great players up front. Lawrence is a really good nose tackle, but specifically Lawrence is an amazing pass rushing nose tackle. And when you need this guy to start moving laterally against this athletic offensive line, he's a good run defender, but he's not as good as John Allen and Deron Payne are, kind of being these guys who can both pass rush on every down as well as defend against the run. And so it's going to take some consistency and balance to stop this team, where you have both guys in the back seven, guys in the front seven, who are able to, at any given point, feel comfortable stopping the pass game when it's quick, stopping the pass game when it's play action, deep shots, and rushing the passer, but as well as looking out for that run game in all directions. And it's kind of weird. Like, it's like, you don't want to be aggressive against this defense. You just need to be on your toes. You're going to give up big plays. Like, you're going to, but you need to slow them down, because the moment they start just hitting you with like chunks of 8-yard run, 9-yard run, quick bubble screen for 17 yards, like play action, deep shot to AJ Brown, that's when you have problems. They're just in the groove and they're flowing and there's no way to stop them. And it's like, you might get a mistake eventually out of Hurts here if you're able to get him down and he's throwing the ball because he's trailing, which we did see eventually in the second Washington game. But it's just, when they're ahead and they're just in their groove play calling wise, they're impossible to slow down if you don't have every basis covered just from a ability to stop X standpoint. And, to be honest with you, like, I don't really know what team is, even the 49ers, like, I don't know that their corners are great. They're good enough to like match up with Smith and Brown on the outside. I don't know that. I know for a fact the Chiefs probably aren't completely filled out on defense to figure out. Maybe Cincy. I don't know I'd have to like really dive into the Bengals defense. I think honestly, I haven't really watched like them like with great detail, but clearly like they're a unit that's more complete, I think, in terms of like player for player than these other two defenses. But the Niners have been better because they have more explosive upside. But we've seen Dallas go up against the Eagles offense when it was Gardner Minshew, and they have more explosive players too. And it doesn't matter because as long as they protect the ball, they're going to get you with this run game. And it's just, it's a very complex problem to solve right now, I think, for the NFL. And I'm interested to see if anyone can stop it, because if the Eagles are up 10-0 early in games, they're just going to win. Like there's no way to stop them when they have that early lead.
Yeah, well, I will say this. So one of the conflicts that you're put in against a team like the Eagles is that if you're trying to run out of base personnel or an odd front, specifically an odd front defense where your personnel looks different when you're trying to stop the run than when you're trying to stop the pass, you make that investment, and yeah, you might be able to plug it up a little bit, but if they're able to just pass out of all those same looks extremely effectively, then you get yourself into a situation where you got to change your personnel, and then once they get you out there, they're just going to run the ball down your throat. And you kind of have to pick your poison, and they can do both so well right now that it really is poison. But for teams like the 49ers who run a different type of front where I mean, obviously it's intentional, but I believe it's a very intentional effort to not have to change your personnel when you're out there. What they do is, and you guys know this, but for everybody else, they ask their defensive linemen to play the run in a much more similar fashion, right? So they've got than they would the pass. So they're trying to knife into the backfield, right, and try and make plays in the backfield. And by playing so aggressively, then they're just asking their linebackers and safeties to come up and fit the run aggressively as well. And so you don't have to change your personnel. You can still run nickel out of that if that's like your base. And it's risky because you can get gashed, but with players like Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner and Hofanga, like we might see a much better run defense, I think, against this Eagles team, because you get your guys into the backfield. Sometimes they're going to make tackles. Sometimes they're just going to force you to, just give up a gap, right? Like as a running back, you can't take that gap. They might not make the tackle, but they force you into another hole where the linebacker is screaming up there to come fit. So, I mean, it's not as traditional. It's not as safe, I think, as running an odd front, like nose tackle, 5-5, with linebackers on the outside trying to like plug everything up with a box safety. But I think against a team where they can do both so effectively, it might work. And because they execute so well in San Fran, I think we'll see a better showing. What are your thoughts on that, Kyron?
Yeah, I agree with that for the most part. Like, I like San Francisco's makeup defensively, but the thing that I like have a hard time, like, it's why I'm going to pick the Eagles to win. I don't trust them on the interior of the defensive line as much to stop the run. Eric Armstead is incredible. He's one of the better defensive tackles, more underrated defensive tackles in the NFL. But he plays a lot of three technique outside. I mean, he's the things they ask him to do isn't necessarily the same thing that you're going to ask. I don't know what's another John Allen or a Daron Payne to do, and he's not just stopping the run. I think that they can have a lot of success on the interior of the running game. But the 49ers do have great linebacking core. The thing that I think that will give them fits is the RPO stuff. You have to account for Dallas Goedert. You're going to have to account for, even AJ Brown. They get the ball to him. Even Devontae Smith on those quick bubble screens, like you mentioned. You have to account for all the stuff that they do off of the run game as well. And I think that'll be just enough to keep that defense on their heels enough to still have those 5 yards to carry that they have. But going back to the game against the Giants, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I do want to give Sirianni a lot of credit, because we've seen teams come out and lay eggs after the bye week, after they had a hell of a regular season. And the mentality that the Eagles had, you saw it. They were locked in on all three phases. Even the special teams were playing incredible, swarming, wrapping up. We see a lot of missed tackles this weekend, but the Eagles were wrapping up very good tackling. And you saw the mentality from the jump. Even with the play calling, they were very aggressive. Even when they got up, they were just going for the jugular time and time again. And as long as they're playing with that edge and they're protecting the football, I don't really. I mean, I would probably have them as my favorites to win the Super Bowl at this point. They're like the best team in football, and I thought they were the best team in football all year. But still, when you get to the playoffs, you have to show it, and they took a really good step going forward. The only thing that I saw that was remotely concerning at all was I thought Jalen Hurts played a damn good football game, but he did kind of hold on to the ball a little bit longer than he normally does on dropbacks. Like I said, he only threw the ball 24 times, so we didn't get to see a big sample size of it, but I think that's something that could get him into trouble a little bit against the 49ers. But I mean, hell, when your offensive line's blocking that well, you got time to do it. In his athletic ability, it'll give him chances to kind of break out of the pocket and keep plays alive. But I'm nitpicking there too. That's the only thing that I saw that I was like a little concerned about. But other than that, the Eagles played damn good ball. I think they match up very well with the 49ers offensively and defensively. I think it's going to come down just to protecting the football and sustaining drives and burning clock, which they both do very well. But I think that the Eagles should be the favorites for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head with the RPO stuff. It's when you get those linebackers being aggressive, you start replacing them with Goddard, you replace them with Smith and Brown, you start throwing the ball behind them a little bit. The Niners are going to, at some point, hope that maybe Hufanga can step in front of one of those throws and get a big play. But we have not seen teams really capitalize on that against Philly yet, so I'm not certain that it's coming. They've just been so good about the timing with that. The one thing with Hurts, I don't think the injury affected him throwing the ball at all. I think he looked fine. I do think running, you saw him kind of avoiding contact. And I don't know that it'll affect him a whole lot because he's just smart about when he takes it. When he did run, it was to space and he was able to get out of bounds or get down. But, it's not even quite RG3 who's like hobbling around. It's a shoulder, right? So you can get down and kind of avoid it. But I do think that it's maybe decreased to the point where they're not going to run him, 18 times in a game at this point in the year. But I mean, you get to a Super Bowl, a conference championship, maybe they don't care. We'll see. But I do think to some extent that was affected. But obviously, I mean, they have enough players. It might not matter at all.
Yeah. One last thing I'll say about the Eagles before we move on from, I do want to give Jalen Hurts a lot of credit. People, they laud Joe Burrow for his like poise and his ability to just remain calm at all times. Younger guys that we've seen coming up, they're just so poised and cool and calm and collected. And I think Jalen Hurts has all of those same qualities. And even though he doesn't have to make as many throws as some of these other guys have to make, he's efficient as hell. He's proved that he knows what he's doing. He processes very well. He has ability to keep plays going. He just finds a way to get it done. So I do want to give him a lot of credit there because I feel like a lot of people try to minimize his impact and his effect on the game. And I think we saw the last 3 weeks of the season what it looks like without him, and what it looked like when they finally got him back. And at the end of the regular season and here, you just see a different level of play from this team when he's out there. And I think a lot of that is just due to his growth and how much he puts in. So I want to give him a shout out because I do see too many people just kind of downplaying him, and I just don't like that at all.
He's getting a bag this offseason.
Yeah, for sure. Because he's 3 seasons in and he's not a first round pick. So the timeline is it's a little bit more eager than some of the other guys who were taken in that same draft class. But
I'll be interested though. What do y'all think about Gainwell? I think Gainwell looked really good when he has a game like that, and you could probably feel a little bit better about not signing to Miles Sanders next year.
No, I think that's
I think he looked really good. I think he could be the RB1 next year.
So he's good. I think you want to add someone with some more size probably to like try and get some of those tough yards, but he looked really good. Another Eagles player I want to shout out. How about Reed Blankenship going undrafted? Like, no, I can't play in a draft where the consensus generally was that beyond like 100 picks in, the talent drop off was like basically 7th round or later for most of those guys. How do we go through 3 more rounds and not pick up Reed Blankenship? Like, I mean, the tape was pretty good for him, and somehow people talked themselves out of it, and now he's starting on the most complete team in the NFL because they moved Gardner Johnson inside, or not inside, but to nickel. So, and not that they, I don't know if the Giants were so good they could have picked on him if they really wanted to, but obviously not being an issue in the biggest game of the year, just want to give him a shout out there. All right, any other thoughts on this game before we move on to the Sunday slate?
None from my end.
No, I'm just with Kyron. I think they're Super Bowl favorites right now for me too.
Yeah, I mean, after that, you don't want to be reactionary, like too heavily reactionary, but after that performance, I'm not sure how you how you
I need to
go
see how
elsewhere.
healthy they were, and they look fine.
Yeah, and they're 15-1 with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah,
when he plays this year. I mean, I think they've shown enough, man. They got to be the favorites going forward.
Yeah, agreed. So, I think they put on a masterclass in the offseason, but not just that, a couple of off seasons putting together this roster. But, I think there are a couple of key takeaways from how they do things in terms of what positions they address and how. And it's really pretty consistent with when I looked across the entire NFL at the top 10 paid players at their positions, and how those players were available to the teams that they were on. Were they only all draft picks who were extended? Were they available in free agency? Were they only available via trade? And if they were only available via the draft, what rounds were they drafted in? So basically, like if you were to try and assemble an entire team of top 10 paid players, or like at least at that talent, where would be the ideal place to try and do that, right? So like if you can't get this player outside of the top 10, then that's the biggest, then you got to prioritize that player there. Eagles were extremely consistent with that model that basically conglomerated the entire NFL. They were very, very consistent with it. Drafting defensive linemen, offensive linemen in the top 10, drafting quarterbacks on a consistent basis, never really being satisfied with that, and not going necessarily back in the top 10, but investing a high pick more consistently than most teams would be willing to when you've already paid your franchise quarterback. Taking interior offensive linemen, generally outside of the first round, but still making the investment. Corners in trades and free agency, they're one of the unique high priority positions where you can find those guys, and there's variance there. But I'm very impressed with that. And the main thing I want to take away is that if you are trying to build a roster like this, then just spam picks in the trenches, offensive, defensive line, and at quarterback. Don't be afraid to take that second round guy that, has some upside and that you really like from a character perspective. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't consider it a wasted pick. Just do it. So for all the teams out there, just anybody that might be listening, get your team to do that if you want to get better, because, you can fill in the cracks everywhere else, but that it's a proven model at this point. By doing that, they made a Super Bowl run a few years back, and they're making another one now. So that's all I'll say on the Eagles. For now, we'll definitely talk about them as a model front office in the future going forward. But that was just my 2 cents for this week. All right. Cincinnati Bengals and the Buffalo Bills. Oh, baby. Bengals are here. The Bills... I was hoping that they would bounce back after last week, and that would be a little bit of an outlier for their postseason run. After watching what they were able to do last year against the Chiefs, I was hoping we might see something more like that. Obviously, we didn't, and they're going to need to get better. They're a good coaching staff and they're a good team, but they're going to need to get noticeably and notably better to compete in the playoffs. They just have to be. And consistency from Allen is one thing, but I think they do need to get better as a roster as well. They need to be able to run the ball, and ultimately they fell short in this game by 17 points. I took the Bengals to cover in this. I still did think the Bills were going to win, so at least I got the protection from that, but this game was really not close. I mean, is this what you expected at all, Nick?
No, I did not. Now, to be completely honest with you, I think got a little caught up in the buzz of the Bengals being upset this wasn't a neutral site game. In reality, I really do think the weather helped them make this more of a blowout than it should have been. But they obviously played better. I think they would have won regardless. When you're the Bills and you're so reliant on these big plays in the passing game, and that's your team, and to be completely honest with you, I think they are good enough in other spots to hold up against most opponents and then get those big plays and beat most teams, even when they're not playing their best. But then you get a game like this where, it's hard to connect on those deep balls because it's snowing, quite frankly, and it's windy, and it's like hard to track the ball in that weather. It's hard to throw the ball in that weather. It's hard to pass protect for long periods of time in that weather. This is a game where you need to run the ball. And the Bills clearly were not the better team. And then I think the Bengals offensive line gets a lot of hate for their pass protection woes. But for what it's worth, like this has been like a pretty good running interior all year long. Like they beat the Chiefs because of a couple of timely turnovers, but also because they were able to run the ball late in the game and ice it because of that interior. And, obviously the RPOs have kind of built off of that with the receivers they have, but that was a big deal. And, Tony Romo kept talking about, oh, look at the size difference. Like, oh, the Bengals offensive line is bigger than the Bills front four. Even without Von Miller, like this Bills front four has been good all year. But let's not forget, like, this is like a strange conglomeration of hybrid defensive linemen. Like even Ed Oliver, who's probably their most natural defensive tackle, is a guy that like you don't feel completely uncomfortable playing. He's like a four tech because he's done that at times. Like these are kind of like undersized guys who are known for their nimbleness and their speed and their ability to rotate inside out. Boogie Basham, Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, all these like hybrid DT defensive end types. And when you get in a game like this and you need kind of to win with your speed and your quickness, and it's snowing, and then quite frankly, turf is like just not easy to have traction on when it's slippery. Like it favors the offensive lineman a little bit more when they're like the strong and powerful unit. And that certainly played to the Bengals, but you have to adjust then at that point. And I don't think we saw the defense have the ability to do that because they all year have been built around that front four and linebacker play. And as we've seen, like their linebackers maybe a little bit better in pass coverage than they were against the run in this game. That hurt them. And then on the offensive side, just again, like inability to run the ball. And I disappointed again in Ken Dorsey. We talked about this last week, like run your quarterback, figure out other ways in the quick game to get the offense going. Because clearly like their run up the middle was not good enough on its own to make this offense go. Like you need to find other ways to be creative. And they kept running rollouts and, 5-step drops and trying to push the ball down the field. And this just was not the game to do that. And that's why you get down early and you're out of it because you're trying to play catch up the whole game. And it's not the weather for it. Not able to do it. Josh Allen did not play his best game, obviously. And credit to the Bengals. I mean, running the ball well. Samaje Perine, adding like another 15 pounds and just becoming like this horse of a running back has been awesome. Joe Mixon, obviously, when he's healthy, has been a good player, especially in the playoffs. They have the receivers. The offensive line stepping up despite injuries. I thought Jackson Carman played a really good game, kind of just coming off the bench and replacing. And then Burrow just poised, in the snow, making the throws he needs to, giving them a lead early and then protecting the ball when they need to as well. This Bengals team is battle-tested. They play consistent in the most clutch moments. And that's why they're back in the position they are here again in a matchup that I think against Kansas City that is very winnable for them.
So I have a couple of thoughts. I want to give it to Kyron first. But in terms of the Bills defense, they're really built to play from ahead, I think. Mm-hmm. And they've been able to do that for the most part with how effective their offense has been. But, when you're going up against other teams who are explosive enough offensively to take a lead on a regular basis, whether it be the Chiefs or the Bengals, it puts you in a tough situation because then they don't become one-dimensional down the stretch, and then they can run the ball on you over and over and over again. And I just want to shout out Matt Milano again. And I think despite draft pedigree, this game is exactly like it's an example of why they prioritize paying Matt Milano in the offseason, and Tremaine Edmonds is probably going to go. You know what I mean? Because one is just more consistent. You know what I mean? One is more reliable. One comes up and yeah, maybe the splash plays aren't as flashy, but I just watched that play he made in the end zone against Jamar Chase. Just that's an incredible play. So just want to shout out my guy Matt Milano. But Kyron, you've been saying all year that Josh Allen in the big games and big moments is turning the ball over much more regularly than you probably can manage against other good teams. So I guess if anybody expected this occurrence, it would be you, although you did say that you didn't necessarily expect Joe Burrow to be as good as he is. What are your thoughts, man?
So in a vacuum, like just reducing it down, just the one take, I just feel like the Bills are just soft. Like it just really, sometimes it just comes down to that. Like on the interior, on the offensive line, they're fine, but they didn't impose their will. They weren't moving people. Even though Devin Singletary had 4 yards per carry, they didn't really try to establish a run. They ran the ball 11 times. I mean, they didn't really try to establish a run, which is a problem I have. And I do agree. I tweeted out at halftime, like, where the hell are the quarterback runs? Where are the design quarterback runs? You have 3 games left to win the Super Bowl. Protecting his body is over now. It's time to go win football games. Like, I was disappointed in that, but I think it's just a mentality thing, man. I do agree with you guys. I think they're really, really good front runners. They're not built to play from behind at all, offensively or defensively. Even though they have, displayed the ability to get stops when it's a close game. And offense, Josh Allen has taken the team down. He got in a couple. The Dolphins game, for example, he went and got them in field goal range for that field goal. Chiefs game, they played well enough in spurts this year, but I think it's a mentality thing. I don't think the roster is deficient in a ton of places. I think they do need some interior help on the defensive line. They need a two gapper, like a guy that's really can really get in there and just anchored in the trenches. But I think they're fine on the back end. I think they're fine at linebacker. I thought Jordan Poyer played his worst game in a long time. He was very undisciplined. I don't know what he was doing with his eyes. A lot of times he's just looking in the wrong spot, especially on those touchdown balls where they're playing just regular too high. Like, this is what they do, and he's like breaking down like he's playing quarters. I just don't understand what he was doing. It was just weird to see from him. And then offensively, I thought Josh Allen started really bad, and then I thought he got in a very nice groove. He started to take the underneath stuff. He started to take the check downs, and they were moving the ball. They were sustaining drives. And then midway through the third quarter, he got away from that. He started getting hungry again and I just was really disappointed because I thought that he had taken a step there, and he was just going to finally, take what they give him and continue to do that and get them back in the ball game. It was 20-10, and I thought they had a really good shot, and he started to force the ball a little bit again. And I'm just like, even if you just dink and dunk and get a field goal there, you put the pressure back on the Bengals. It's a one-score game. Just keep doing what you were doing because it was working, and you were sustaining drives, keeping them off the field when your defense is clearly struggling. So I don't think he played just like the worst game ever, but I mean, he did have 2 turnovers. He did, get a little bit hungry and not take what was given to him. I think even if he made the step, though, it would be very tough for them to win that football game. I mean, we've seen it happen before. He's played a flawless game and they still lost last year because, when it comes down to it, they just find it's fun. They just find ways to lose. I don't think that it's necessarily an offensive problem or a defensive problem. I think you can give them a little bit more help on the interior on both sides of the ball. Maybe you can get a running back one. If that'll help them, I think they're fine right now. We've seen teams win Super Bowls with running back by committee all the time. I mean, the Patriots did it. We just saw the Chiefs did it a couple years ago. The Rams. I mean, we can go down the list. But if getting a running back one will help you mentally, philosophy-wise, be like, hey, at least we have a guy now, and we commit to running the ball more, then do that, whatever you have to do. I see a lot of Bijan talks, somebody like that, which those Adrian Peterson comparisons were crazy, by the way. I've been seeing a lot of those these last couple of weeks. But if that'll help them commit to running the football a little bit more, I would be okay with that. But I think it's more philosophy mentality thing than anything with the Bills. I don't think the roster is too deficient. We've seen them go to AFC Championship games. We've seen them compete with Mahomes and the Chiefs. We've seen them compete with these guys. They have a good enough team to get it done. It's about finding ways to get it done. And I don't think that you can necessarily blame Lester Frazier or Ken Dorsey explicitly here. I think everybody has to get better all around. And I don't think any grand, rash decision should be made yet. You're still winning 13 games a year. Like, don't blow it up yet. Come on, let's be realistic here. Like, everybody should come back and you got to tweak it and you got to adjust and find ways to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, this is their first season without Brian Dable. I think we've seen what kind of impact he can make as a coach. I mean, let's hit the pump the brakes, slow down a little bit before we start getting too frustrated. I mean, they have a winning window that they're not out of yet. They need to make some investments. I think, whether they go with running back or an offensive lineman relatively early, they do need to make some kind of investment that's going to help them run the ball more effectively. I will say this. Were you guys surprised at all that they didn't make a little bit more of an effort to put Josh Allen into some designed runs? I mean, I understand that there's like a bigger play to be had throwing the ball for the most part, but I just felt like they didn't really even try that. And that's been such a big part of their offense. I mean, his ability to do that has been a big part of their offense for years now. And they didn't really do it much all season. I kind of thought that they were just trying to save him for the games when it was really necessary. but I didn't feel like they used that. You know, we talked about it last week with the Chargers, different situation because they were ahead, but I mean, you know, I think you just got to use everything that you have in your bag, and I didn't really see that very often. What were your thoughts on that, Nick? I think you're muted.
Mike, disconnected for 1 sec. Sorry, my bad. I think they run that touchdown in with Allen, and then they feel like, okay, well, we got in with one, drive running the ball with Allen, and we're gonna give him a break, and then they never got back to it. And I think Kyron's absolutely right. You saw like what has been more of a long-term thing from Allen previously, but really, shortened into this game of forcing the ball downfield. Oh, they're in too high shells. I need to be more patient. Take the underneath, and then he does. And then with it being a 7-point game, we're back in it, just lacking the late game patience, almost just panicking a bit to find those throws and then trying to make the big play downfield on like every single play, like just extending plays when you don't need to. There were throws underneath to be had that he was not making. This Bengals defense is good, like give them credit, but the Bills are not lacking the talent to move the football in that weather against Cincinnati. And I think this is ultimately what has separated Allen from Mahomes in the previous couple of years. We see the NFL make this transition to nickel on early downs, playing too high. Everyone's like, all right, they're going to have to be patient, take these throws, make the reads. Mahomes has done it. He has like full on become a guy who can just be a pocket passer, which is why this injury is going to be so fascinating because he's going to probably make it work regardless. Josh Allen has that injury. I don't know that he can do it because he has just shown that his game has become, oh man, like I know I can roll out and make this crazy 60-yard throw that no one else can. And it's just so enticing that he's been having a really hard time break away from it. And I think that I even would like to see them mix in just like screen passes, like just design short passes, like just get him used to doing it because I think he makes one downfield throw to like Dawson Knox in the middle of the game for 25 yards. And he's like, all right, we're going. We're throwing it 25 yards every play. And it's like, we gotta dial it back here, man. We gotta spread the field a little bit, both vertically and horizontally. And we're just, I don't know. It's like they're looking for the big play to dig. He's looking for the big play to Diggs every time.
I was just about to say that,
Yeah.
but like I think it doesn't help. And you know what? I'm a competitor. I played football for a very long time, been in the rooms for a long time, but it probably don't help when you got Stephon Diggs in your face on the sideline. Give me the ball. Like,
Yeah.
Get that guy a screen pass.
No, I was just about to say that, but he's not doing that if they're finding ways to get him the ball. He was open a lot. Like you said, they were playing that too deep shut a lot, and he was finding the soft spots. He's one of the best at it. And Josh Allen, for whatever reason, wasn't getting him the ball in those situations. And I don't think the pass protection was like such an issue. They got after him a little bit in the second quarter. They really got after him, but he just wasn't finding them for whatever reason. So I see why Stephon Diggs was so frustrated. But when you guys are already a little bit pressed in that situation, and you probably pick him up a little bit more than that. But I get it on the other end too. It's like, bro, this isn't the time to wallow in your pity. It's time to go win a football game because our season's on the line. So I full well understand why Diggs did what he did, and I'm okay with it. In fact, I appreciate it. But you got to know your guys as well. If that's going to send your guy to a tank, which Josh Allen has proven to be a very emotional player over the course of his career. And even when you touch him, he acts like you can't touch him, and it bothers me to no end. But like even when they were getting after him a little bit, he wants to fight after the play. Like he wants to get in guys' grill. It's like you got to know your guy, and maybe that isn't the best thing you could do for him in that situation. So, and I think, hey, it might just be a team chemistry and matchup thing. Like when it's going good, it's going good. When they're 50-yard bombs on everybody, it's easy to be happy and celebrate. But I think, like I said, it goes back to the mentality thing I said at the beginning of this. They need more leaders on the team. I think Diggs is a leader, but listen, I like Deion Dawkins, but he's a goofy guy. If he's the second leader on that offense, like that's probably not the best thing for that team. Like,
Diggs can be a goofy guy too. I think they're all kind of maybe a little.
Yeah,
they need
the difference with Diggs is like, when it's time to go play ball, he's like a gladiator. Because he could be goofy off the field. He's flossing his teeth on the sideline and stupid stuff like that. I've seen him do that before. But when it's time to go like line it up and it's time to get into action, I think he has a different level of respect because of what he's able to do. I have a couple of friends, buddies on the team. I have one on defense and one on offense. And it's funny, like the way they both talk about it is very similar. On the other hand, with the Chargers, I have a buddy on offense and defense. They were kind of like playing blame game with each other a little bit. But it seems like they're more on the same page in Buffalo. And I think Matt Milano said it in the post-game interview. He said, we just didn't have our juice today. We didn't have our excitement about us today. So whatever it is mentality-wise that you need to develop that, regardless of the situation, regardless of the circumstance, that's the step you need to take. Because we see what the 49ers look like. They have their boom box on the road. It doesn't matter where they are. They're coming out with their boom box. They're jumping up and down. The whole team singing their song. They're ready to go regardless. So until you can develop some of those things as a team, I think we're going to see them continue to go to these second rounds, AFC championships, and sputter out before you get to the promised land.
Trent Williams,
I think there'd be
enforcer leader there. Yeah.
Trent, you got Trent. Trent Debo is like, all right, you got Trent Debo, man. But
yeah, there's some serious attitude there, and Kittle too. I mean, like
sure.
But I'm curious about this. If you guys feel the same way, I'm not surprised there's not really finger pointing at this point because they've had sustained success. There's like a belief in the process there for sure. I would assume, and Kyron, I'm sure you can speak to that better than either of us could. But did you guys feel like there was a difference between Sean McDermott this year and in previous years? I feel like he's been very, very stoic throughout the majority of his tenure as the Bills head coach. And this year, I felt like he was more emotional. He jawed with the refs more. It just felt a little bit more all over the place. And like Kyron, you've watched plenty of AFCs too. Being in the AFCs over these few years, like I've seen, and being from that area, I've seen the Bills play a lot on TV. Mm-hmm. Like not just 45-minute cutups, but like the full games where you're seeing the head coach on the sideline a lot more. I just feel like his tone has changed a little bit since when he first came in. And I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't know what that would look like behind the scenes, but just on the sideline, I mean, that's just something that I've noticed. Do you see anything there? Do you feel the same? Did you not notice it, or have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not going to lie to you. I haven't noticed it at all. So that may be something that I can, look back into or ask around. But now that you mentioned, I mean, hell, they have gone through a lot this year. I mean, the quarterback gets hurt halfway through the year. You lose Von Miller. Jordan Poyer's out half the year. Micah Hyde. I mean, even if he was a little bit more emotional, they have the DeMar Hamlin situation, and then all this stuff happens. So if he was more emotional, I don't necessarily, give him a pass for it if it was detrimental to the team. But I can understand why the environment created that, that little bit of an edge or chip on the shoulder that he would have, because you lose some of your best players, man, and your quarterback, his elbow is hurt for 4 games, and you'll have a really bad stretch, and then you come back and the Dolphins are on your butt, the Jets are on your butt, the Patriots are still there. Like maybe he was a little bit more emotional this year, and that could have had an effect on the team for sure. But that's something that I'll ask about, and I'll get back to you guys. But that's interesting. I hadn't really even thought about that.
I just pointed this out. I don't remember who said this on Twitter, but I saw it, and it's a little unfair because I think Greg Rousseau will be a Pro Bowler at some point here, but they've gone 4 drafts without drafting a Pro Bowler.
Oh yeah, it was Solak. I remember that tweet, which I thought was super unfair because
it is unfair. But it's,
were they lacked for getting home run guys in the draft? Brandon Beane went after guys aggressively in free agency and filled those needs.
True.
At every turn. Mm-hmm. So offensive line wise, I mean, he went out and got a Roger Saffold to try to shore that lineup. He went out and got Stephon Diggs, bringing Diggs over. That's another example.
Yeah, that 4-year stretch that includes trading for Stephon Diggs, who's been an All-Pro player on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, they had their picks though. The Diggs draft. I think really what's hurt them is they haven't drafted O-line enough. I know they signed Saffold, and he's good enough, I think. But I think they've selected 3 offensive linemen now before round 7 in the past 4 years. I think that the investment there needs to be higher. And we're coming back. We're talking about the interior. Like, you just need to be taking interior guys at least on day 3. And they need more of it. They've taken some tackles. Spencer Brown's decent, but like that's like their largest investment in the draft that they made at offensive line is Spencer Brown.
Well, I mean, I think that there's truth in that, and they also like their plan has been pretty clear at this point. It's like make minimal investment on the offensive line, just enough, and then Josh Allen is going to do the rest for us. And maybe that puts a lot on his shoulders. Maybe we should be questioning that a little bit, versus how he's playing, because like it's pretty clear that the organization and everybody is just saying, you got to do this for us, you know? So I think that we should probably point at that a little bit more. I don't necessarily think that they're drafting in terms of the quality of player has been underwhelming or a disappointment, because they still have good guys. They, you know, Pro Bowl is a funny thing, because it's like, you know, you've got guys
It's not a good measurement.
who this year might not be in the Pro Bowl officially, but there are a number of picks they made in this draft who could easily be Pro Bowlers next year. I mean, it wouldn't be out of the realm of it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that Kyrie Elam is a very good corner, makes a Pro Bowl next year, right?
I thought Kyrie Elam did a hell of a job for them this year for what they asked him to do. He struggled a little bit early, but
especially without Trey White.
Especially down the stretch of the year, he played damn good ball. He had a couple of interceptions in big moments. He had a couple of big pass breakups. And going back to the Pro Bowl point, Dre Greenlaw wasn't a Pro Bowler this year, so who the hell cares about the Pro Bowl? You know, I'm gonna toot the Tua horn because he's gonna make it now. But it's gonna be funny, like, to see all the reactions. But it's like, the Pro Bowl selection process is almost a little bit antiquated.
It also
it is. Like,
favors fan bases who are riled up like this one, who have good teams, and they, you know.
Right.
It's, I don't know. It's
like, I know you're a lot higher on Matt Milano than I am, but it's like, I thought Matt Milano deserved all his accolades, and that's somebody that necessarily didn't have the cachet coming into the year. But it just depends on the year, man. Like, people talk about production, and production is the king, but Foye didn't make a Pro Bowl, and he led the NFL in tackles again for the second straight year. Nick Bolton didn't make a Pro Bowl, and he had 170 tackles and was a huge impact for the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, it's I don't understand the process here. How do we get to some of these picks? But go ahead, Nick. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I just don't understand the process going into, especially for certain players on really good teams.
Yeah, no, I mean, Terry McLaurin hadn't had a single accolade from the NFL, Pro Bowl, top 100, anything until this year. So yes, it's not the greatest selection process. Really, the point is they've had good players. You're right. The quality of players has been good enough, but they haven't hit any home runs. And to some extent, that's luck. You just like kind of hope some of these players really excel. And maybe next year, like, we see Rousseau take a next step because he has another year with Von Miller. He really becomes like an edge one pass rusher type. But, you know, their star players right now are Allen, Diggs, and then we're probably talking about, you know, the Milanos, the Trey Whites, the Deion Dawkins next. I think they're. Let's
not get it twisted. Trey Davis White is a really good player.
Yeah,
he just didn't play most of the year
too, and he's been kind of, you know, he's a very good player. The identity is Josh Allen. Like, and there's no problem with that. Like, I think the Chiefs were kind of that early on with Mahomes, but they also had those weapons to like support it. And it's not that this roster isn't talented, but the direction, I think, needs to be a little more concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. I think, you know, I don't want to come down too hard on them overall, because they've drafted good players. I mean, Ed Oliver, he's kind of one-dimensional for the 9th overall pick, but he is a really good pass rusher, which is more important. I mean, Dawson Knox, he's become a pretty good player. So, you know, a couple of high-quality players coming out of the 2019 draft. I mean, you could probably make the argument that Dawson Knox could be in the Pro Bowl conversation, whether it's true or not. Gabe Davis, like Dane Jackson, like Isaiah Hodgins.
Can we talk about that for a second? The Gabe Davis, the wide receiver 2 situation, because I think it's just absurd. People are talking about that he's not a good wide receiver. Like, people talk about, oh, he has some drops and stuff. Of course, yeah, he has drops. That's a part of his game, right? But if he caught all those balls, he'd be wide receiver 1. He would have like 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns. I think because of those deficiencies he has, just dropping the ball a little bit, maybe not, you know, knowing his depth on some routes. He does have some communication issues as well, but he's a really good wide receiver 2. He averaged 16 yards a catch this year. He had 800 yards this year. Like, that's what you want from a wide receiver 2. Everybody's not going to be Hill and Waddle. Everybody's not going to be Smith and Brown, like, or Higgins and Chase. Like, as a wide receiver 2 in the NFL, he is a very good wide receiver 2. Maybe they can get another guy with some speed to kind of like put some more stress on defenses. I think they can upgrade there for sure. Maybe in the second round, like, you get a guy like a Zay Flowers to help that team, maybe probably take it to another notch there. But I don't really
He's
think
going
the
early
Gabe
in the
Davis.
second round.
You think so? You know,
Yeah.
his stock's rising for sure, but
Yeah.
there's too many receivers in that ilk, right? Like, I don't think we're going to see 5 guys go first round.
Well, I don't think we're going to see many go that early at all yet, but yeah.
I think teams are going to overreach for speed, though. Jalen Hyatt's going to go higher than he should because he has speed. Even if he doesn't have a necessarily huge productive year, teams are going to have to account for his speed. Teams are going to have to account for Flowers' speed. Even if a Downs or Addison falls a little bit later, you have to maybe consider taking a kid like that because they're just so dynamic. You have to account for them. Even what do you think about the Hutchinson kid? I think he's really good.
I actually have not. Donnie's a big fan of him. He says I have not done a deep dive into Hutchinson, but yeah, there's a lot of those type of receivers in this draft. Right. And if Buffalo's looking for one, like they could I think they probably will find one in round 2, even if they need to move up a little bit. I wonder, because I don't think Gabe Davis is like a receiver that is specifically known for his deep threat ability. Like that's not the type of player that I want him to be. But it seems like the majority of his catches are that. And it's just, it comes back again to Josh Allen. Like, we're really looking for these deep balls, and it's just,
all right.
I don't know. Like, I wish Crowder hadn't gotten hurt early. I think it was a big injury for them because I really believe that he is like the type of receiver that makes Allen a full field passer.
Yeah, well, Beasley was kind of a lost player for them, and there's a reason they brought him back because he had a consistency in his route running out of the slot. Isaiah McKenzie's a good player, but like Crowder is that guy more like Beasley, that very consistent route runner, finding the zones underneath, very sure hands. Like McKenzie has had big plays, but like he's a little bit more boom or bust. And Gabe Davis is kind of that too because of where they target him down the field. Like that's why he didn't clear 1,000 yards, probably because he'll have a really big game, but then he'll be quiet for a game or two. So I think that consistent player outside of Crowder was lacking. And I mean, James Cook, I think, has the ability to do that. I think he kind of got a rough start to the year.
He had some fumble issues.
I don't know if
that kind of sat him down a little bit.
I think so, because I think that we could easily come into next year and see him be like a really impactful player for them because he has the explosiveness that they don't have at running back position. Haven't had, and also he can operate effectively out of the slot as well. So I think it coming from Georgia, you wouldn't necessarily think that, but like he had probably a difficult start to his year mentally, and then I think sometimes you just need time to reset yourself. It's hard to do that in season, especially as a rookie. Like on
a team like that as well. It's not like he's playing on a team that he can get a ton of reps.
High expectations,
right? But going back to Gabe for a second, like he gets those targets because people are bracketing Stephon Diggs. They don't want to let him get off. And people have to account for Dawson Knox. So he gets a lot of those looks because he's essentially, if we're talking about threats here, he's the third threat on that offense. So he gets a lot of those looks. But a lot of that is going to come back to, like you said, get another guy that's probably more speed and puts a little bit more stress on defenses so they can do a little bit more. Or Josh Allen taking the next step in his development and just taking underneath stuff more and really kind of progressing there. I think he can make a lot of strides in this offseason. If he gets in the film room and really breaks stuff down and sees, or somebody needs to sit him down and be like, hey, look, this is what you're leaving on the field. And I guarantee you that they've done that in meeting rooms. But until he takes that next step, and it's crazy to say that because look how uber productive Josh Allen is, right? Like he's still giving you damn near 5,000 yards, 40 touchdowns a year. And it's crazy to say, but it's the whole honest truth. He can still take another step, and we don't even know what that would look like. That might be something we've never seen in an NFL player before. So it's critical, and as tough as I've been on Josh Allen over the course of the last 2 years, it's because like I think he can be something that we've probably never seen before at the position. So hopefully they get it together, but I think people need to really relax on the Bills because I see a lot of doomsday. People like, get rid of Leslie Frazier, get rid of Ken Dorsey. Like, relax a little bit. What we talked about a little bit this morning, Nick. I mean, statistic-wise, they've been top 5 in both offense and defense for the last 2 years. So the talent's there, the coaching's there. You got to figure out how to get it done when it matters. It's as simple as that.
Yep.
Well, I will say one of the things about the Bills' offense is that they embrace Josh Allen's ability too. So it's not just that everything's on him from just a talent perspective. It's like I don't know if he's being coached away. I get the distinct impression he's not being coached away from having his eyes all over the place. You know what I mean? Coming off reads quick and then going back to that read. And like, I kind of think they're like, you kind of proven you can do it. So just you do you. So the question is, how do they approach this offseason? Because we've seen very brief stretches where he's a super efficient quarterback. And so we kind of know he can do it. But what are the coaching points for him throughout the season? Like, do they continue to push for that? Do they try and I don't know what the phrasing I want to use for it is, but do they try and put bumpers up for him? Not to make the offense like simpler, like, that phrase may have been used before, but just to like reel him in mentally a little bit and get his eyes to be more.
If
Go ahead.
if the problem is like that, they're leaning into that philosophically and they're trying to push him to make these throws downfield, I don't know what fix coaching wise is going to get, like, 'cause then it's a philosophical problem. Then it's like, okay, they just really want to make these big plays and they're thinking at all times the execution of Allen and these receivers is going to be enough that they're going to be able to create these plays in every game they play. And clearly, as we saw this week, that's not the case. So I don't know. If that's the case, then I'm not thrilled about his chances going forward to really realize that he needs to be making these throws. I kind of doubt that's the case. I think it's probably him. In which case, like, I think this is kind of we're probably 1.5 years in, I think, of him trying to recognize this. And we might get an idea kind of halfway through next year of like, I don't really want to put limits on it, but it's like, after 2 years, you kind of would hope the guy kind of starts seeing what direction he needs to be going in. And I think this coaching staff knows the right thing to do. I wouldn't be concerned about that. Again, I think they have the pieces in place. I wouldn't panic at all. Kyron's completely right. Like, they have everything they need, quite frankly. It's kind of up to Allen at this point, I think, to really take advantage of whatever they add this offseason and then make that next step, as I think Mahomes has.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that everybody has faith in him because he's a hard worker. He fixes mechanics very effectively through hard work.
One of the most impressive things we've ever seen with quarterback development. He's definitely capable. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is just another aspect that, you have a tendency to believe he could change, but like, I just wonder how hard are they pushing that? Like, do they want to create a more narrow path for him to operate within to become more efficient, or do they just want to say, look, what makes you great is something that's not coachable, so do we want to coach away from, like, I'm not sure what their mentality is on it, honestly. I don't know if, Kyron, you can speak to that at all, but that can be the last thing before we move on to the final game of the weekend.
I don't really have too much to add there. To me, it's just like, it's really inexplicable. You just got to find a way to do it, man. Like, there's no way the Bengals and Burrow should be where they are for the second consecutive year, but they are. They're just finding ways to get it done. Like, you just got to go get it done. I think it's just simple as that.
All right. Got to get it done. Simple as that. Let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys not getting it done against the San Francisco 49ers. All right. So my personal take on this going into the game was, I think people are overreacting to 1 week of playoff football from the Cowboys against a team that were just, not as good. Quite simply not as good. And so I basically thought this was going to happen. I kind of thought that the 49ers offense would be a little bit better against the Cowboys defense, but this being the final score is not particularly surprising to me. I did pick the 49ers to cover. So I don't know. I mean, we just kind of saw Dak do Dak things and turnovers and some that are like, how do you throw that ball in this situation? I don't know, but I don't know. I mean, I wish I could have said that this was a game really, truly competitive to the end, but it kind of seemed like they got into their own heads fairly early. And I don't know, the 49ers probably could have closed this game out a little bit harder. They had some of their own issues, but I mean, the better team is moving on.
Yeah, I mean, I think these teams might be closer to each other than they are to the Eagles, and that's maybe a little bit scary for these two teams just based on this game. Neither team really was able to separate themselves on either side of the ball. There were times where this game was kind of ugly. It was just I don't think the coaching was particularly bad. Maybe Mike McCarthy could give him some dings for some of that. That last play was I've never laughed harder at just like an individual play than that lateral play at the end. Like that's kind of consistent with McCarthy. Like the initial idea of like, hey, let's add an extra skill position players to the field like on a lateral play is like, oh yeah, that's like a smart idea. But then the like full execution of it is just like, oh yeah, we forgot to put other guys next to the center so that he could be helped out in protection when it's our running back. You know, it's like, all right, well, whatever.
It's like that play. It's like do you remember that fake punt play where they snap the ball and there's just like 3 defensive linemen surrounding his center and he's just tackled immediately. Like, it reminds me of that.
Bro.
People are clowning Zeke, and it's like,
no, that's bro. Like what you got? What's the kid's name? Alzier. You got a really good linebacker running full speed at a guy.
He's 5 yards to run. Like there's nobody in front of him. Just
bro.
bam,
The funniest part about it is they took a time. Like D'Amico took a timeout. Like there's no way they're doing this, right? And then they came back out and did it again. I just don't get it. Like you got first of all, the entire right side of the line was dead. They aren't, so you don't even have to count for those guys essentially because none of those guys can get like. It's just stupid, man. Like, what are we doing here? Like, I vouched for Kellen Moore all season. I'm like, Kellen Moore is, and you as a head coach have to take a lot of blame for that too because you can override anything at any point.
Yeah.
So to me, that falls on McCarthy more than anybody. But I just don't understand. It's unfathomable almost at that point. Like,
they got to get rugby people in there to discuss these lateral plays because they clearly don't know what they're doing. Get some support runners for these dudes. Don't just throw them in the middle of the field with nobody around them. Yeah, it's just this Dak. Look, this was one of his worst years since that 9-7 year when they missed the playoffs. And I don't want to overreact on him too much. Some people are saying like, oh, he's clearly not the answer and you got to get rid of him. And it's like, we always knew Dak was kind of in like the Stafford realm of quarterback, right? Like his best years are still not quite elite. His worst years, are maybe somewhat detrimental to the team. But I know this roster has talent, but there are enough holes that it's like, I don't think it's like completely on. This is obviously a very good 49ers defense. The turnovers are a problem. And I think earlier in the year when people were getting on him early, like a lot of those were maybe not completely on him, but it has now been issue for him in clutch game, like important games, like playoff games. So as last year against the Niners too, that these turnovers are on him. And there you could argue maybe were 2 more plus a play that probably should have been a safety as well in the end there that he's able to stay up against. Like, it's almost like, and sometimes he's trying to do too much, and sometimes he's just going through the motions, and it's right. Like too much, and it's just like falling asleep and making the throw that you shouldn't. And it hurt them. I think they outplayed the 49ers in the first half. Like they were the better football team, and they went into halftime trailing because of those turnovers. Like that's
right.
You can't have that in a playoff game, and it's
what
tough.
Was that throw? The throw to Gallup where he was just like locked down in coverage, and it was like. What was he trying to do there?
He was just late, though. If you
late.
Make it, we've seen it. So I'll put it this way: I watched Justin Herbert make that throw 6-7 times a game. I watched Joe Burrow make that throw a lot. Even guys like Tua and Lawrence make that throw a lot. He's just late on the ball. I think it even confused Gallup because he's like, all right, the ball isn't here yet. He stopped in the play, and everybody's just killing him for it. But it's like
I don't think he was even open. That's the thing.
Well, after staring him down for a while now.
Right. But the thing with Dak is just like, and I agree with you to a certain extent, Nick, on like the supporting cast, but when he has the turnovers, this is the problem. Like he's in the red zone going in to score. There was 2 scoring drives that he took away from them in the most inopportune times. It's like, so if they're good enough to get in the red zone, they're good enough to score points in the red zone. We saw it against, and people talk about the Bucks, but the Bucks defense was top 10 all season in every category that you could think of. And he carved them up. I mean, the play calling was superb as well, but they had plenty of opportunities and he just couldn't get it done. Losing Tony Pollard hurts. Their inability to run the ball on the interior hurt, but the chances were still there to win the football game, man. And I don't want to go back to like regular season football, but we saw the Giants do it with much less against really good teams. Like we saw the Bengals find a way to win against what I consider superior rosters, and they're just finding ways to lose these ball games. Every time it's a big situation, and the defense, I think is going to look a lot different next year because you can't afford to keep all these guys, man. Like you're going to have Micah under contract for one more year, but that secondary is going to probably undergo a major overhaul. The linebacking core, you probably need to get some more linebackers in there. I mean, the team could look significantly different than it looks now, and I think that they may have missed their window. And Tony Pollard's a free agent now, like unrestricted. Even coming off the injury, I mean, he has a fractured ankle, right? Fractures normally heal pretty good. Like that's not something that most teams would be. Yeah, most teams aren't going to consider that a reason to not go get a guy. To the contrary, it just helps other teams out because they probably can justify not paying him as much as they were going to pay him before this. It's just, I think the roster is going to look so significantly different next year. And
Dan Quinn's probably going to be gone too.
Yeah.
And Dak has a $49 million cap hit. There's no way you're going to be able to move him in any capacity. And I don't necessarily think you should, but the supporting cast that's been good enough to get you to these moments may not be there next year. And I think that's going to be a big problem for them going forward.
No, I thought last year.
Dan Quinn, defensive coach.
Yeah.
Did you think I said Dak?
No. I was talking about in general.
Everything.
Okay.
But I thought last year was like the year that they were really good and underachieved, quite frankly, record-wise in the regular season, and then fell flat in a game I thought they were going to win against the Niners because, again, like turnovers were an issue and they got behind early and were playing catch-up and just didn't have enough time in the end. Similar like kind of end sequence that was kind of questionable against the same – kind of back in the same situation here. You lost by 7 points. You lost by 6 last year, the same team. Tough, but – I was impressed. I really thought this team was going to be more of like a 10-9 win team who, maybe lost wild card weekend this year. I was impressed they were able to get to 12 wins, look as good as they did at times this season, especially when they missed Dak for, I believe, was it 5-6 weeks early in the season. And, Cooper Rush played well enough, but obviously I think they were better when Dak came back. You have to credit this entire organization to some extent for that they were able to win 12 games and put themselves in a situation again. But it's, like Kyron's saying, like I think that they kind of ramped up to last year. They didn't get nearly as far as they wanted to. They had another opportunity. Maybe there's a chance they overachieve again next year, but it's just they're in a spot where it's going to be tough to like to what's the word I'm looking for here?
Retool the roster.
Retool the roster and compete to this level again. It's just, especially in this division, like the Eagles look like, they might also lose some players, but they look very good. The Giants, I'm terrified of. Like, I honestly think that team might have one of the best futures in football. And then, Washington sucks, but we're, whatever.
But just the NFC in general is a gauntlet, bro. Like the NFC in general is young, and they're like the 49ers aren't going to go anywhere. 49ers are going to be there. You still got your teams in the NFC South. Who knows what happens? But Detroit. But who knows in the NFC South? I think the Panthers have a very good nucleus. They could make some moves here, and depending on what happens with the Bucks, I've heard some talks of Lamar coming in there, and if they try to find the pieces to get Lamar and draft an offensive lineman, that's a team that could be right back into contention. Who knows what they do with their quarterback position? But the NFC as a whole, it looks to be formidable for the foreseeable future.
Some team in the South is going to acquire a QB, and all those teams have some like identity pieces that they're like one of those teams will probably be impressive next year. Like there's gonna just the way that these conferences transition. This was a very top heavy year. You're going to see more depth next year. There's going to be the Eagles might still be at the top of the Niners, but 3 through 8 it'll be more competitive.
Man, listen, even the Saints still have an incredible defense, and I've heard some talks of maybe acquiring a Jimmy G. A Jimmy G on the Saints is a formidable team in the NFC. That's good enough to get you 10, 11 wins, especially due to their skill set at wide receiver. They have a lot of possession guys that don't necessarily stretch the field, which will cater to Jimmy G's, his skill set and what he does well. I think there's just a lot of teams that can make a step in the NFC, and the Cowboys seem to be on the downturn.
Philip Withers in the comments says Mike McCarthy is 0-4 against the 49ers in the playoffs. Yes, this is true. That I feel vindicated in my Mike McCarthy take, where it's like I always felt like, first of all, we should talk about last week's Monday game because we did our recap show before that Monday game, and I have thoughts and I'm curious about what you think about that, Kyron. But I think people overreacted about how good of a coach Mike McCarthy is based off of that I still think in big games he's less prepared than the other elite coaches, so it's no surprise to me. Now, to be fair, Kyle Shanahan has a pretty ridiculously good record in general in the playoffs, so like there's probably going to be a fair number of coaches who have a less than stellar record and, just haven't actually gone up against him 4 times. But Kyle Shanahan is a great coach. There's really no question about it. But Monday night game, I love Todd Bowles. I really do. I don't think he should keep his job after this season, personally speaking. How do you feel about that, Kyron?
Yeah, I mean, so they're in a tricky position here. It's like, I think he's a good defensive coordinator. He's good at what he does, but you need a leader of men. Where Bruce Arians was a guy that commanded the room. He commanded the entire team almost too much, because that's why Brady and a lot of the guys wanted him out. It's just like, you need a head coach, you need a CEO, and I don't think that he's a CEO. What he does well, he does to a very high level. The Bucs have been a top 10 defense for 3 years now. They've always had a pretty good defense, man. So when you look at that side of the ball, it's like, even with all the injuries they had, all the turnover, they lost Shaq Barrett, which really killed them. I thought their lack of pass rush to be able to really affect people when it mattered really hurt them, especially down the stretch. So the defense isn't necessarily the problem, but that doesn't mean that he's a good head coach. And I don't think he's necessarily a head coach. I think he earned his shot to have a chance at it, but it's just tricky because they made the playoffs. It's like, you make the playoffs, you had all the injuries. It's just like, he has enough excuses going for him where he's like, okay, I made the playoffs. My quarterback's old. My offensive line was terrible. I don't have a running game. And my defense was still top 10. I gave us chances to win games. Like, he can say that. But I think when it comes down to it, he probably should get one more year, but I wouldn't have been upset if they moved on from him at all. I think that the windows are just too short in the NFL, and you have to maximize them. And I think there might be another team, if they don't make some major, additions here, that could undergo a serious overhaul and look very different going forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree. I think the game management has always been an issue. It was an issue throughout his career with the Jets. And when he didn't have, what was his name? He was long-time offensive coordinator. I think he had a head coach stint back in the day too. He was he's basically like Fitz's offensive coordinator. He was an offensive coordinator for him and like Fitzpatrick for like 3 or 4 different places. What's his name? Anybody remember? I forget. Marty Morningweg.
Oh,
no,
okay.
That's yeah? I think so.
I'm not sure. My first thought was Adam Gase. I thought about Gase. I don't know, but that's not Gase. We're not talking about Gase.
No. I think not. It's not. I gotta look. The name's escaping me. It's like as soon as I say it, you guys will be like, "Oh yeah." So he's an older coach. He's not in the league anymore. But when he didn't have like a long-time senior offensive mind to help manage the game on offense, it hasn't looked good. It really hasn't. And that's a big part of being a head coach. Phil Wither says the Saints are a Derek Carr away from winning the division. They're definitely a Derek Carr away from competing in the division. I think
depending on what the rest of the division does.
Exactly.
The Kamara situation is going to really affect that team too, because he does so much for them. I mean, running the ball, catching the ball, being a threat, helping other guys get open. He's such a key call for them. And I think they do need to upgrade a tight end as well. Taysom Hill's a Swiss Army knife, but you need a real inline blocking, pass catching tight end, and that could really help unlock them another level. But the defense is so good, and they're wrapped up for the most part. The defense isn't going to change a whole bunch. They're a piece away from being really good, but they have a serious cap problem, so it's going to be hard for them to make a lot of moves.
Well, they're all the expectation now is that Michael Thomas is gone too, because he's already agreed to a contract restructure that I have to look at it more closely, but it definitely implies that he's going to be released after June 1st. And if he agreed to that, I would assume that he just is retiring, because he had enough leverage that he was probably going to get paid more from the Saints this year than he would have been able to get on the open market. So I don't see why he would agree to that. And so my guess is he's calling it a career after just being injured every year for like 3 or 4 years.
Isn't he a dead cap hit though?
Well, basically, I mean, I can look at it real quick, but the way that they did it is they restructured his salary and brought it down to basically the vet minimum. And And so that gives them flexibility prior to June 1st. Because if they kept him at his cap hit, it would have been probably too high. They've got to make moves to bring the cap down. That brings it down automatically. They can't release him before June 1st because all the cap will accelerate. The dead money will accelerate to this year.
Mhm.
But if they keep him until after June 1st, all that, it will still accelerate, but to the following year. So it won't hit all this year. So they're going to have a big hit for him next year, but not this year. And the only way to do that was to bring his salary down. So either it was going to be a restructure, turning his salary to signing bonus, if they wanted to do something with his contract, or this. But this is a clear implication that he's done playing in the league. So that's just something to keep in mind with the Saints.
That's tough for them because it just straps them, though. June 1st is going to be slim pickings for any moves to be made, really. But maybe an Odell type situation in New Orleans, bring them back home. I mean,
well, the reality is, I'll just say this: now, because what they've done going forward, they don't get cap relief after June 1st.
Mm-hmm.
If they release him, they'll save $1 million, which won't even be anything.
Right.
So like this makes it easier for them now, but like it won't affect whether they make a move for a receiver. Then it doesn't matter, basically.
Gotcha.
So this is just a preemptive move, and but it just sucks because it means a player like Michael Thomas we don't get to watch anymore. More than likely. That's just my take on it, but I just don't see why he would agree to that if he wasn't planning on moving on, because he kind of had him over a barrel in terms of his payment. So that's just a little bit on his contract. But as far as the Bucs go, it's like I don't see their path for immediately getting better. You know what I mean? Like they seem like a team that should probably be looking to trade guys as much as possible. That have some value, not everybody, but like some of their older players, Michael.
Get a Mike Evans.
Yeah, exactly. So
I need to look up the Bucs draft history, but I think one thing that I've had a problem with for them specifically is they've operated like a team that kind of expected Brady to just be around for a while.
Yeah, they took a lot of defensive guys.
And it's just like I know Brady like seems like he could play till he's 60, but I just I would have liked to see more prepping for the future, taking positions of value, get more tackles, get more corners, get more wideouts, edge players. Just make sure like when you move on and maybe inevitably need to move on for some of these older players that you're paying, because this is an older team, at all levels. Like they're gonna have to move on just because they're gonna need to get fresher faces on the roster at some point here, and just not only just to clear cash, but not that they're incapable of that. They can probably get some picks for some of the talent they still have their roster, but from the starting base, they got Joe Tryon, Kyle Trask seems like, at least from what I've heard, is kind of a throwaway pick at this point. Like he hasn't really developed the way that they've hoped. Although it seems like they like their Florida guys, so that might have been the reason for that. But Robert Hainsey's been decent. Jalen Darden's gone. Cade Otton was a good pick this year. Like that's nice, but it's just like that was your start. Is like you replace Gronk with a young tight end, and that's one position. Gadecki, people are overreacting to that. Like it's year one. Like give him some time. Like I think he could end up being something, but it's just like not enough yet for a team that is clearly going to be in transition once Brady leaves. And maybe he's back next year. I don't know. Maybe they hire somebody he likes, but I think that the division helped them get in the playoffs this year. I think Brady gets a lot of heat for what the season was, and I think like you could clearly tell watching him that he at some point here it's in some ways like phoned it in offensively, just frustrations there. They're talented. They have talent.
They're going to lose a lot though, just the free agents too. And then you got to consider guys like Levante David that could potentially retire. He broke through last year. Their best young DB outside of Winfield Jr. is Jamel Dean, and he's going to be unrestricted free agent. Guys like Carlton Davis are getting a little bit older, probably want to get paid. I mean, he played really well when he was on the field. You got to get a left tackle with Donovan Smith. He has a pretty big. I'm not sure what his salary would be for next year, but you got to get you a left tackle. You got to get running back help for sure. I mean, they're going to lose a lot of guys to free agency, and they're going to have a lot of guys that are probably looking to get traded and move on themselves. So,
well, Carlton Davis got paid this past offseason. He was a free agent, so so they just paid him. But I mean, like, it's tough because Brady is a free agent, and he has a void. His contract has a void in it. So basically, they're going to take a $35 million dead cap hit just for him to be a free agent. And so, like, that's tough. Levante David, he's going to be a free agent, but he's also a void. So, like, a bunch of their highest paid guys are all voids because they doubled down. Akeem Hicks is a free agent, but he's also a void. So all these guys are going to carry cap hits, even though they're not on the team. Akeem Hicks, Julio Jones, William Golston, all those guys will be negatively influencing the cap while also not being here.
What's about to be a situation? Because that's an interesting player for them. Like, he's an anchor for the defense, but he has value that somebody else could probably give you some stuff for him. It might be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of a core guy, though. So if you want to move on from him, you're kind of really packing it in. They paid him in 2021 offseason. And so he makes 17.75 a year on average, which, you know, he was coming off of a hot season. I think that was after their Super Bowl win, I guess 2020 that would have been. So it makes sense. If they were to move on from him, let's say they trade him, they can save $5 million on the cap and probably get a decent pick back.
Yeah, and then you could draft a guy like Siaki from Baylor, kind of refill him for cheaper. Like, I think that's something they could broach because he's definitely impactful. But I think you can find somebody to kind of, not to his level, but to do what he does and feel his kind of responsibility for that team. But a lot of questions going forward for them, man. But the good thing about it is they're in a division where a couple moves can be made and they can still be there to win that division next year. So,
yeah. I mean, again, this might be one of the most high variance divisions in all of the NFL next year because you look at teams like the Panthers. They have some core guys. I mean, obviously DJ Moore is a really good player. Their offensive line is, after being a net negative for so long, is actually one of the better lines in NFL now. And then they've got a few other guys. I mean, they've got the kid from LSU, Terrace Marshall. They've got him still coming back. They've got they traded away.
They ran the ball really well too. I think they were like top 6 in the rushing offense. Like, they ran the ball very effectively.
Good.
They've got defensive guys too. They've got Derek Brown. They've got Brian Burns. They've got
J.C. Horn
on the outside. Yeah. So you know, they've got Jeremy Chin. Like, they've got some legit players. And I think, I don't want to say I hate they're a quarterback away. Like, I've always hated that because it, like, this implication that they're like one of the best rosters in the NFL aside from a quarterback. I wouldn't say they're that, but they've got young core guys and a high enough pick that they could go out and get a quarterback and money that they could probably fill out the roster in certain places. So they're in a prime position, but will all depend on what kind of player they get at the most important position. The Falcons, I mean, they need a quarterback as well. Their offensive line was better than it's been. They were also really good at running the ball. As far as weapons, they've got Drake London and Kyle Pitts. And then defensively, they've got AJ Terrell, who I think people forget about a lot, but and they've got a defensive line that has a couple older players. They don't have that star pass rusher already, which, you know, means they're probably like a little bit less of a ready to roll roster. But still, like, they're teams that with certain moves and finding the quarterback, they could be competitive. Saints are clearly the best overall outside of a quarterback position. So probably it's easier to add a veteran guy, especially with the age of the roster, and try and capitalize on that. And the Bucs are the one where, you know, I just don't know what exactly they're going to try and do, what they're going to try and convince themselves of. I mean, if Brady goes, I think realistically they got to be looking at a bit of a reset here. But But any one of those teams could be among the best in the NFL, or could be picking in the top 10, depending on how their quarterback position goes, or whatever. That's what I mean when I say high variance. Like, we could have multiple playoff teams, or again, we could have a team win it going 9-8, or So it's a weird one. If I was a fan of a team, I would be hopeful, just because there's no dominant team within it. But any other thoughts on the NFC South while we're talking about it?
I don't particularly have any thoughts. I mean, I think Atlanta's an interesting team. Also, all these teams would probably be brought up at some point, except for maybe New Orleans, the Lamar Jackson discussions, if it actually comes down to that. I just think it would be fun to see him in Atlanta with the way their offense is designed. I don't know if they'd be a team that'd be interested in him, but it'd be fun. Yeah, that's my only real thought at this point.
Yeah, only thing I have to add is I know last year the Bucs were really, really keen on trying to get Aaron Rodgers to come down to Tampa. So that'd be interesting if they try to rehash that out and see if they can get him down there. Because if they could get Aaron Rodgers down there, I think that would kind of I don't know how it would work financially, but if they can get a guy like that down there, I think a lot of those guys would be incentivized to try to come back and run it back at least one more time, or at least keep some of the core guys offensively, like Mike Evans and Godwin and those guys. They'll probably want to come back and play for an Aaron Rodgers instead of asking for a trade, or the organization want to move on from them. So that'll be interesting to see if they can kind of get back in those sweepstakes, but it'll be kind of hard to work that out financially.
Yeah, I think it would. I think that would be a mistake, personally. I think you won your Super Bowl with Brady, and you went all in to try and win another one. And I get it. I understand he's Tom Brady, and yes, Aaron Rodgers is more mobile, but this is an older roster, and you'd still be concerned about overall health of players. And I think personally, maybe Bucs fans would feel differently. Maybe they don't want to give up yet, but I think it would be a mistake. I think you need to reset here. I think you really need to take a little bit of punch on the chin and not phone it in, but a move like Aaron Rodgers, I don't think would be the right one. I also don't think, based on what you said, I don't think Rodgers necessarily would want to go to Tampa. I mean, does that sound like something he would want to do, Kyron, based on what you've heard?
Oh, see, I haven't heard anything from his end. I know that the Bucs were wanting to reach out about it. So, from only thing I've heard about Aaron Rodgers is that he was interested in going to back home to San Francisco, which most quarterbacks who doesn't want to go play for them. And I know the New York Jets was brought up, so I don't really know. You would know more than me how that would work out financially for them. That would be probably really tough for them as well. But I think they're more financially suited to be able to pull off a deal like that. But those are the two teams I know that he was interested in. But the Bucs news was just from the Bucs camp and who they wanted to get in, because I think it kind of fits the mold of where Bowles will probably want a veteran guy in. He's not going to want to leverage his future on a young guy. He has to win next year. If he has another year like he had this year, he's going to be gone. So they're cleaning house. They cleaned out almost all the defensive staff, most of the offensive staff as well. So this is going to be Bowles' team going forward. So I know he's going to want to get a veteran guy in there, but who knows what's going to happen, man. We got a lot of stuff going on. This is going to be one of the craziest movement off season we've seen in the NFL in a long time.
Yeah, well, I think the Niners could probably get it done. They're projected to have about $16 million in space. If they were to go Rodgers, they could pull some levers and make sure that they've got enough space to get that done and do whatever they've got to do. Excuse me.
And it makes sense for them because they can get rid of Trey Lance. I think the Tennessee Titans and Rand, those guys over there, that they love Trey Lance. So it would make sense for them to go there. And then Brock Purdy's a 7th round pick. His hands are tied. He can't do anything. So he'll be there regardless. So it'll be easy for them to move stuff around for a quarterback if they wanted to go that route.
Yeah, there are certain things like the Niners, they have some free agents. Let me just look at them real quick. Some guys that are relatively impactful that they'd have to figure out. Jimmy Ward's gone, Mike McGlinchey's gone, Deshaun Gibson's gone. It's probably actually not
right,
not too bad. Jawan
Ward's
Jennings
not playing the ton anyway.
So. Yeah, so like they are a spot. I mean, I wouldn't count that out. Especially if they end up falling short because of Brock Purdy, which I don't want to say is gonna happen, but could happen. And they're like, look, let's go get our guy. I think the Jets could also get it done too. I don't think either of those teams would have major limitations. The Jets they don't have a ton of cap space, but they're really cap flexible right now. Like they haven't leveraged themselves at all. So they could, when they sign Quinn into an extension, they'll free up some space there. They've got other guys that they could let go or do whatever they got to do. So either one of those places is, at least from a financial perspective, definitely good to go. I mean, the Jets would have more draft picks to offer up because, I mean, let me look at the 49ers for real quick.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of football sense as well. Like for Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career, he wants to go to contenders, and everybody believes that the Jets are a quarterback away. I know I don't like the saying either, but they are a quarterback away. Everything else on the team looks very, very good, especially if the offensive line comes back healthy next year. You get AVT back, you get a Mekhi Becton if he's able to come back and be effective as a right tackle. You really kind of have one of the best rosters in the NFL. If you add Aaron Rodgers to that, if Aaron Rodgers is playing quarterback for that team this year, they might still be playing football. So that makes sense. And then we know how good the 49ers have been, and they've gotten it done with much less at quarterback. So it makes a lot of football sense for him as well.
Yeah, the only thing is that if the 49ers go that route, they're not going to end up with a lot of picks because we're going to see something probably like the first Wentz deal or better for him. So in terms of pick compensation. So the 49ers right now this year have 2 third-round picks as their highest picks, 100 and 102. They're both comp picks. So the Jets have their full assortment of picks, which means they could offer more and still have picks in this draft to actually add an impact player in the first round. And you know, you get Aaron Rodgers, I guess, who cares? But like that is just something to consider. So the Jets are like more ammo ready as far as trade is concerned, but both financially could do it no problem. So if that's the way that it's going to go, you know, that's the background, I guess. I don't know. I think the Jets are a fine spot for him. I worry about the amount of influence he'd have there. I think the 49ers, you go and like nobody overrules Kyle Shanahan, no matter who you are. So maybe that is like a safer place in terms of organizational like stability and hierarchy. You know, if you give up picks to bring in Aaron Rodgers to New York, like he'll instantly probably be the most influential person in the organization, I would guess, like very quickly. So that's just something I would be a little concerned about as well. But all right, guys, anything else before we call it a day?
Nothing for me, man. Excited to get down to the Senior Bowl next week, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that too. I'm trying to figure out. I'm gonna be driving from DC to Atlanta on Sunday, so I'm gonna have to get up as early as possible and figure out how I'm gonna like listen to the NFC Championship game on a radio because I'm probably not gonna be able to watch it, but hopefully I'll get that figured out.
All right. Well, we will be back this Thursday, Nick and I, for another show. Remember, you can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxine. You can find Defiant Takes Football and all social media platforms at Defiant Takes. You can also find us on podcast stream now as well if you search Defiant Takes Football. You know, subscribe on YouTube if you would. Throw us a like for the show if you liked it, and we will have tons of off-season content coming up, beginning with, of course, the Senior Bowl. Nick, let everybody know where they can find you until we talk to you this Thursday.
It's at Nick with Sports on Twitter. That's still it for now. I don't believe the SIS draft page has gone up yet, but hopefully we can start cranking out some article content soon as well, and then we'll have more content for you.
Beautiful. And Kyron, how about you, man?
Follow me here at Kyron Samuels right there on the screen, and then that'll take you to my Twitter. And there's a link tree with everything that I'm doing, and I'll update my Twitter pretty regularly with what I have going on. So that'll be it for me as well, man. I'm excited for the all-season content to start rolling.
Yeah, man, me too. I mean, this is I think I put out a tweet the other day where it's like, for me, the best 5 events in the NFL are Divisional Round Weekend, then conference championship weekend, and then the draft. So I have that to start looking forward to. But big shout out to Noah Ashley, producer at No Ashtray Sports on Twitter. We will have the site launched very soon. Reagan's hard at work on that. So we will have written content for you coming from Defiant Takes Football as well. We'll let you know when that is live. And we will see you this Thursday.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.